and we are in the Mishnah, and then we'll have to switch to the Gemara. We're in the Mishnah where it says V'lo yeh lokeach. V'lo yeh lokeach hirako sadeh. That should be the bottom of the Yud Ches Mid Aleph, the last line. V'lo yeh lokeach hirako sadeh. You see that? The last line, by little ayin. Lo yeh lokeach hirako sadeh mocher b'shuk. One should not buy. One should not collect vegetables in the field and sell in the marketplace during Shemitah, even if they're not tzvichin, of course. Avu locate, but he can collect, and anybody else, and even ubno mochar yodo can sell for him. Lokach la'atzmo v'hosir, if he collected for himself and he left over Shemitah fruit, so and it's not b'diavad really, but since he didn't collect with the intent of making business, mutal l'mochel, and subsequently he can sell them. Okay, now let's turn to Gemara. This is what's really hard to find. This is on Yud Testament base. On Yud Testament base, no, it's not so hard to find actually. The third line down, by the little aleph. See that little aleph that was put there for us? Tanya. There's no Tanya. You don't have it. You have Tani actually. The line before, right? Tani. Now this is ruses. Now I have to make the ruse. Try and find a legal loophole that 5 should collect vegetables and appoint as partners and appoint somebody else to be the designated seller. Because then this is trying to employ a loophole that the 5 guys are using this one guy to sell, but really they're all partners. So this is basically the same as of any other mekach menkar during Shemitah. But you can sell your own stuff and your friend's stuff when you're not partners. Now, here it's an interesting thing which he says here, that this is talking about really your own stuff you're not supposed to collect to sell. But one of the major loopholes which you have during Shemitah, which we do employ Loch Lamaisa, is the heter of Havlah. Havlah means if that I'm making a profit is not apparent, so that's okay. Now the classic case of that, which is a joke, but we use it anyway, is that when Sukkot after Shemitah year, so you're really not allowed to buy the esrog, because the esrog is Kedusha Shevi'is, and you're not allowed to do business in Kedusha Shevi'is, right?
Yeah, but you don't know when it was harvested.
No, but it goes after Lakita and esrog, because they're chonate at different times. So it goes after Lakita when it was harvested. The assumption was harvested during the Shemitah year. So the thing is that what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to buy the box or buy the lulav, right? And that's havlah, because the cost of the esrog is absorbed in the cost of the lulav or the box. Problem is that the sellers say, yeah, sure, whatever you say, right? But they have no real serious intention of keeping the halacha. But hypothetically speaking, that's the way the sale is supposed to be effective. And that works because of the concept of havlah. So as long as it's not apparent and I'm making money off the deal, that's okay. So here too, the same thing applies. If I'm selling for another guy, not as a partner, just as a favor to him, which is okay. I'm not doing schleir my own fruit. They could also sell my own fruit along with that through the heter of havlah. Okay? So says the Gemara, Chamisha achim malaktim, when 5 brothers collect, but they're not partners. These are not brothers or partners. And one of them is selling for them. One of the brothers is selling for them. It's okay, and we don't make it like a Marasayim prohibition. We just let it go. Rabbi Yossi Barbun, as long as they don't set up a store, because then it's too big a joke, right? What does it mean that they shouldn't set up a store? They shouldn't have a designated time and place in which to sell. Even if they don't have a designated place, if they have a designated time, that in of itself is sufficiently significant that it makes it prohibited during Shemitah. So the bottom line is that one cannot come into a situation where the ruse is too great and everybody understands that there is a, it's a joke, and that to such an extent it's prohibited. Okay?
Shemitah Exchange Incorporated.
Shemitah Exchange Incorporated, right? Okay? Tanya, we learned. A chenvani, a storekeeper, who was cooking vegetables during Shemitah. Now, you should have the knack of this now. What can he charge for? What can he not charge for? He's cooking Shemitah. He's charge for the price for the service of cooking, but he can't charge for the vegetables, right? You can't reckon your reward for the vegetables. But he can count, say, put in wine or shemen as spices or as cooking oil. Avtola, and avtola literally means on his that which he would have taken to remain idle, meaning this fancy way of saying the work which he did, the labor,
The fuel.
right? Fuel too. Rabbi Ilo commanded those people who would boil vegetables, do not they boil grain. Do not reckon your wages on the oil, which was from Shemitah, but rather on the grain, which came from Chutz La'aretz, so it was 6-year grain, and that's the same principle which we're saying here. Okay, now go back to the Mishnah again. Last time for this Mishnah, all the way at the end of the Mishnah, which means on Yud Chesam Beis, Lokach Bechor, the second line in the Mishnah on Yud Chesam Beis. Amud Beis, Mrs. Zucker, Amud Beis. Okay? Lokach Bechor LeMishta Beno. If you bought a Bechor, you're a Kohen, let's say, and you bought a Bechor for your son's Chasna, or Regel, or for Yontif, Lo Tzarech, or you don't need a Bechor, Mutzal Mocher, you're allowed to sell it to others. Tzidei Chayav Ofos V'Dogim, hunters who hunt down, and obviously trap is a better word, the wild deer or birds or fish, Sheis Damla Mine Tmeim, who came across stuff which was Tomei, Mutar L'Machan, they're permitted to sell them. It's such a Jewish answer. Yeah. You've gotten this into me already, the bottom line thing. It's your fault. If a guy can make a killing in pork bellies, in other words, he's got a real Metzia deal on pork bellies. Fidarko just happened across it, is allowed to buy and sell it. As long as it is not his ongoing occupation. The Chachamim forbid that. Okay?
There's no letter there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Now this
Seems like it's okay.
this Bechor that the Kohen is selling, this has nothing to do with Shemitah, is it?
No, but these are prohibited buying and selling. We're spilling out into other prohibited buying and selling activities. Okay, now go back to the Gemara. So you start Talmudin by the 2 dots, right? So it says I'm a Talmudin, I have Rabbi, you have Rabbi Huda here.
Yeah, we do.
Right, I have Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Meir b'tchil lo yukorin oisam. This is a little bit, the Lashon here is somewhat messed up. B'tchil lo yukorin oisam el osei Shevi'is. Korin osam means they only gave the appellation of Pasal Edus. In other words, that they cannot testify in a court of law to those, to both to those. Here, Elo does not mean only. Here, Elo means also to. Okay? Do not be confused. Here, Elo means also to. They gave it both to people who collect during Shevi'is and to people who sell during Shevi'is. Osvei Shevi'is means those who collect the actual harvest, and Sochei Shevi'is are those who make business. Now, the Osvei Shevi'is also sell. Okay, but they sell what they collect themselves. Sochei Shevi'is are people who actually have a exchange business in Shemitah. Misharabu Anosim, once there were many goyim who compelled Jews to work during Shemitah, Chazuli Kreisam, they only gave the appellation of Paslatus to Sochrei Shevi'is, to people who made their living off Shevi'is fruit, by people who were compelled to harvest the fruit from their field and sell that they said they were not Paslatus because they were being compelled by the bandits or by the government perhaps even to do that during Shemitah. Rabbi Yehuda said even the Sochrei Shevi'is, even those people who are who making their business off Shevi'is, exchange and sale. But when is he apostle? Mosai bisman she'ein lo selahi, when this is only trade. Aviyesh lo shalohi, but if he has any other trade or raise a kosher, is kosher leidus. Hey chavido. Now we're going to have two possibilities of this. Hey chavido. What are we talking about? Hayoshehu bato. In other words, what kind of socher is considered to be uniquely involved in Shemitah fruit and therefore is Paslatus. Hayoshehu bato mimlachto kosh neshvor. All the 6 years of Shemitah, he doesn't do any work. Come Shemitah, came with Shavuot Shvi'is, that's when he kicks into gear. His chilmashid yodo, he extends his hand, literally. Vinose, and he starts doing business with Peiros Avero and fruit, which is the fruit of sin. If during the Shemitah year, he has some other line of work, kosher. Lav is not possible. But let's say he did have a legitimate line of work the rest of the 6 years. Came to Shvi'is, he's mafshit. No Yodov. When Shvi'is came, he decided to change his occupations. And he starts stealing in fruits of Aveira, even though he doesn't have any other malacha during Shemitah itself. Kosher, why? Because of the rest of the years. The rest of the years, he's involved in a legitimate occupation. So here, the Kavanoki says a big chiddush. I don't know if it's true, but he says it's talking about a guy specifically whose regular occupation is not relevant during Shemitah. Let's say he's some sort of farm, hand of some sort. So then there's a justification for him going solely and exclusively to some other occupation during Shemitah, and a libut zchus that he's not all rotten, but he just didn't have anything else to do during Shemitah. But if his other occupations, say he's a lawyer or a doctor or a school teacher, and he can do that during Shemitah, so then he has no excuse to go and do something else during Shemitah, so then this wouldn't apply. Then if he foresaw, even if all the other 6 years he's constantly involved in his own occupation, since in Shemitah he's involved exclusively in this occupation, Shemitah, whereas he could have well done what he normally does, so then we zap him, we say it's Paslatus. Okay, Rabbi Abba Bar Zavta and Rabbi Avo B'Shem Elazar said, "Look, Rabbi Yehuda the Masnisa. It looks like Yehuda in our Mishnah that where you can according to the where Brights explain it, that if he has no other malacha, he's still kosher. Equals Rabbi Abba Bar Zavta the Omar Shmuel B'Shem Zermene, and Rabbi Abba Bar Zavta was praised that he quoted Rabbi Avo, who was younger than he was, and this is a very nice sign of Anova that he was willing to quote somebody younger than he. That's all one interpretation. Rabbi Chia Tani L'Chumra. Rabbi Chia learned this whole issue L'Chumra. Hey Chavida, how so? Hoya Yoshev Osig Mlachto Kol Shnei Shvuos was a guy who was working in his own trade all 6 years. He extended his hands to dabble in for fruits of sin. If he has another malacha during Shemitah, he must simultaneously be engaged in another malacha. Only then is he kosher. Being live during Shemitah, he's solely and exclusively involved in this dabbling in the fruit of Shemitah. He's Paslatus. Aval. What if he didn't have any work the rest of the Shemitah? And when Shemitah started, all he was doing is working at this fruits of sin. Then even if he has another malacha, he's possible.
There's a super chumrah. In other words, if this, even let's say in the 7th year, he has another malacha. In other words, on the side, he's a chveis, a train conductor. But besides being a train conductor, he's also doing Yerushalmi Shevi'is. That's no good. Why? Because he only woke up to find himself another occupation during Shemitah when he wants to cover up for his working in Shemitah fruits. So it's a much more rigid interpretation than the first one. Says more lo b'dah, not in this much more rigid interpretation. Rabbi Avar Zavta and Rabbi Avo Sebashem Los Loch Rabbi Mazdisa. No, this is much original interpretation. Tam on Rabbi Avar Zavta Mashmu V'Shem Zermine. Says the Gemara. Well, actually, it's a question. Let's be read like this: Lo b'dah Rabbi Avar Zavta Rabbi Avo V'Shem Rabbi Lazar Halok Rabbi Mazdisa. Is it such case also the same thing? Says the Gemara. Taman Rabbi Avar Zavta Amar Shmu B'Shem Zirmane. Yes, possible. There, Rabbi Avar Zavta said something in the name of somebody's younger. Of Achaken, perhaps the statement was really going on this much more severe shita. Right? Amar Rabbi Yosef Arvun. Taman Eina Malchus Ones. Now here the Gemara says a very interesting reconciliation between the two Perushim in Rabbi Yehuda. Taman Eina Malchus Oneses. Where do I say that that we're much more severe with the individual? And if he had any even if he has another malacha with it, but that malacha he was mechadish during Shemitah, that is still that he's still postulatus. That's when the king that's when the king does not compel anybody to work. Where the king compels people to work, then we're much more lenient. Then we say, even if he only adopted this new malacha during Shemitah, so we still are much more lenient with him. And so to the other component, that even if he doesn't work the other 6 years, right? So then we said that if he doesn't work the other 6 years, according to the first trial, we said if he works the other 6 years, even in the 7th year, he completely devotes himself to Shemitah fruit, he's possible. He's still kosher. Again, the other 6 years he works legitimately. Even though in the Shemitah for a year he completely devotes himself to Shemitah fruit, he's kosher according to the first pshat.
It was the same kind of work.
What?
The first 6 years was the same kind of work as what he's doing now, except now the fruit is Shemitah fruit.
No. Oh yeah, well, according to what you call it, according to the Kavanaki's interpretation, yes, right. And according to the second shot, so that would for sure be possible in that case. So we're saying they're not arguing. First shot, which says he's kosher, is when the malchus is onesim, when it's compelled to work at it during Shemitah. The second shot is when the malchus is not onesim, he's not compelled to work, he's working on his own volition, so that's where he becomes possible.
When malchus is onesim, by the way, he's not being reimbursed either.
Right.
There's a book written by a guy, Gedalia Ebal, called The Jews in Their Land in the Time of the Talmud, where he uses references like this from Yerushalmi to paint a very bleak economic picture for the Jews post-Horva. For these hundreds of years that the Romans were ruling them. Yeah. They basically were Sardis financially, severe.
Okay.
The Kapanaki's example, isn't that the heter that caterers use nowadays, let's say on regular Shabbos, that they're doing the same
Havlah.
Yeah, Havlah.
Yeah, Havlah is one of
the most of the
well, that's not the Kavanaki. No, the Havlah, they don't do just Havlah on Shabbos. They have to, they actually have the workers do some work on a weekday. There's perhaps symbolic, but at least some work. So they usually, that's Yerushalmi straight up, that they're Mavli and something else. Okay? Lulavi's halacha base. Lulavi's radim. Lulavi's radim translated as hawthorns. You know what hawthorn is? Nathaniel?
Yeah,
it's a kind of bush.
Yeah, it's
less than Mohicans.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's a
thorn?
Okay? It's something. We can say with definitiveness that it's something. So love is radim v'acharuvi. Now we know that Caribs. Yerushalmi Shevi'is udmeim Shevi'is.
they have their Shemitah. If you exchange them for something, whatever you exchange for them is Shemitah. Yesh leim biur, and they are at some point no longer available to the animals in the field, and therefore you have to eradicate them, or l'dmeim bium, that which you exchange for them has to be eradicated. Levei Allah. Now, these are fronds, branches from an oak tree, va'bitna, a pistachio tree, va'atodin, a type of thorn. Yesh lam shvi'is l'dmeim shvi'is, they do have shvi'is, and but the exception ain't lam beer v'lo d'meim beer, because they're constantly available to the animals in the field, so there's no beer. Avol la'alin yesh biur, but the leaves do have biur, because leaves and seeds are edible in all these cases, and you have to at some point eradicate them from your house. Neshanoshim me'vein, because the leaves fall off the tree, and therefore there are times when they're no longer available to the animals. Says Gemara, Bereish of the Pirka, at the beginning of the discussion in the Mishnah, not the beginning of the Perek, the beginning of the discussion in the Mishnah. Atomer enochlin alikar, you said that you're not allowed to eat on the assumption that there's still some left on the tree. Alikar means that there's still some touch left in the tree. They caught Amar, and here yet by the pistachio and the oak, ochlin alikar, you assume that there's stuff left in the tree and there's no need for beer. What's the difference between the two commodities? Pinchas said, Tamon ain't sofan lahakshos. By the pistachio and the oak, whatever remains in the tree is never too tough to eat. So therefore it's always available to the animal in the field. But here, by the hawthorns and the carobs, sofan lahakshos, at some point whatever's left in the tree gets too tough to eat. Became chukshu nasa kiveim. Once they get tough, they become like branches. And therefore, whatever edible fruit you still have in your house, you have to be mevar at that time. So say if you left carobs out on the tree, it seems that the carobs will get too tough to eat. So therefore, if you have edible carobs in your house, you have to be mevar them. Okay? B'tani, we learned, Kulan shenichnasu mishishis l'shvi'is, any of them which started growing in the 6th year and grew into the 7th year, are shishis, have the halacha being part of the 6th year. Chutz min ha'adol, except for adol, which here is called cress, but that should not throw you off. Generally speaking, whenever we don't know what something is, we call it a cress. Okay? Because there's so many different kinds of cresses. So, chutz adam neshir, because it's a vegetable, so therefore it follows whenever it's collected, which would be here the 7th year. Rabbi Yochanan said, Leiskan mishishis l'shvi'is. We're not going from the 6th year to the 7th year, ella b'shvi'is, rather the 7th year. Now, this is a strange thing he's saying here, that the way that Kapanoki explains it, lulavim, with that which we're talking about in our Mishnah, these fronds or these palm branches, they're not generally considered to be eaten. They're not really edible material.
They're really considered to be like wood, until you designate them to be food. This is true also about grape branches and also reed branches. Now, so Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's not possible that they have a din of meiser or shvi'is when they are wood, and therefore they only become fixed to be whatever year they're affiliated with when you have the thought at the time of collecting them to eat. That's when they become food, and that's when it devolves upon them the chiyuv of meiser and shvi'is. However, those who hold that this stuff can get the din of shishis hold that when at the time you collect them, you designate them for food retroactively, it becomes clarified that they're always food, and therefore they become already considered to follow. Well, let me rephrase that sentence. They follow the 6th year. In other words, machlokas, since you have to designate these things as food, and you designate them in the 7th year, do they then become part of the 7th year? Or like anything which is food except for vegetables, do they go after the 6th year, which is the year in which their trees budded? Right? This is machlokas here. Rabbi Yochanan says, Leis Rabbi Avo, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan says, Leis kam shishis l'shvi'is. Shishis, he says that if you start in the 6th year and went in the 7th year and then you had a thought, it's not affiliated with the 6th year, but rather it's affiliated with the 7th year. Okay?
Right. Shilas or the Hoover or the Darvin Lamafre are not whether you say Brera here or not. That's what it boils down to. Says Vatani, didn't we learn Haseya, Vaezov, Vakoranis, all sorts of vegetables which go wild in the field. Misho Vilon, once you brought them and planted them in your chotzer, that's when they received the halacha of become chayiv and meitzrus. Otherwise, it's considered to be hefker. But at that point, if it was the second year, where they had grown in the wild in the field the second year, and you planted them in the third year in your backyard, so then they have the status of shlishis. Mishishis l'shvi'is. And if you glad them the sixth year and replant the seventh year, they have a loch of shishis. So there you're counting back to the previous year, and here you have a tzad to say that you count after the subsequent year. What's the difference? Rabbi Yossi said shlishis v'shishis the third and sixth year. Even though there's no meiser sheni in those years, yesh bohem, they do have meisrus. So therefore, it's good to follow, the third year or the sixth year, which is the coming year. However, Shvi'is emo meisus kol ikar. The Shvi'is is no meisus, so therefore it's more of a chumrah if we throw it after the previous year and give it the status of shishis, because then you're going to have to take off tithes on it, and that's more of a chumrah. Says Gemara, Loche, they asked the kasha, Lokein. Rabbi Avob Shem Rabbi Yochanan, Leis Ka Mishishish L'Shvi'is Shishis El Shvi'is. Our question is really like this, because we see that there's a Bryce, I think, which says that Rabbi Yochanan said, you follow the Shvi'is. Right. In other words, you don't say Uvar Davar Mafreya. But the kasha is the brights which we just brought down a couple lines ago say Mishishis L'Shvi'is Shishis. In other words, we got sidetracked. We asked the question, when do you count backwards and when don't you count backwards? Then we said, depends if it's a chumrah, because then it's going to be chayiv and meiser, or not a chumrah. But the bottom line is that this Brisa said that if it goes in the 6th or the 7th year, in order to zap you with meiser, we say it's a shishis, the fruit. Well, that's not what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan said if it goes from a 6th year to a 7th year, it's considered to be a shvi'is fruit, so it's a kash Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, located on Rabbi Yochanan, Leis Ka Mishish L'Shvi'is Shishis Elo Shvi'is. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan said it doesn't go back to the 6th year, it goes forward to the 7th year. So I was worried to do this brisa. This is a very interesting answer. Taman Birshuz Bailim. Lulavim, they don't grow as fruit. So therefore the Aniyim don't really have any anticipation of receiving them. That's how we can say they go after the 7th year. But fruit, which is what the Bryce is talking about, it's not real fruit, but it's secondary fruit, but nonetheless it's a kind of fruit. The Seah and the Azov and Koranis, which are kind of vegetable, I should say. So B'shus Anihim, the Ani is looking forward, anticipating getting them. Mutav litein le echad bevadai lo shnaim. Well, the reason for that is because they grew to begin with in the guy's backyard. Mutav litein lo echad bevadai lo shnaim misafei. So therefore, we give the guy, we give one meiser bivados, meaning we put it back to the previous year, and we don't give it to dinim misafei, because then if we made it suffix shishis, suffix shvi'is, then he would end up getting nothing. Because the guy would say, I don't know if I have to give it to you, so he's not going to give it to him. So therefore, since their Aniyim are anticipating getting the stuff, we say, let's give it to the Aniyim as if it's 6th-year stuff for sure. It's really just misafik, but where you give misafik, we give it to the Aniyim. Okay? Alim shekov shanim lulavin. You
soak together or pickle together the alim, the leaves, which is in the Mishnah, do have a concept of biur, with lulavim, which don't have a concept of biur, because they're constantly in the tree, lulavim. Is tanoi tani ben elu yesh lem biur. So some tanoim said, in that case, both lulavim. What? Yeah. 6 o'clock. Still have time. If you have leaves which were again pickled with lulavin, so some say that both the leaves and the stalks have to be mevar. Because now they both got mixed together, because pickling together transfers taste back and forth, right? Is tani, there's some Tanoi said, bein elu, ein lem beer. There is no beer. Because the transferring back and forth, according to that would be a kula. These Tanoi, there's some who said, even though they mix together, never the twain shall meet. Alim yesh lem beer, you mevar the leaves, veina mevar lulavim ein lem beer, you're not mevar the lulavim. Now, Madamar yesh lem beer, he who says yesh lem beer, that's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, we haven't seen this yet. Rabbi Eliezer is going to say that when you have two types of vegetables which are pickled together, the Zman HaBir goes by the first thing. I would say, you have cucumbers pickled with tomatoes, and cucumbers Zman HaBir is earlier. So you go by the Zman HaBir of cucumbers, not tomatoes. So that's. So here he says you have to be mevar both them. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Madamar Eilam Biur. That's Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says that if pickles come, you have to pickle together the cucumbers and tomatoes, and cucumbers come first, and tomatoes come second. You go after the tomatoes. So here we extend that even further. We say since lulavim have no din biur, that's it. The whole mixture doesn't have a din biur. The whole thing is exempt. And the view said yesh lem biur, only yesh lem biur, that you do biur on the leaves, but not on the lulavin. That's her own Gamliel. And Rabbi Gamliel's opinion is that each one retains its separate identity when you pickle the tomatoes and cucumbers together. So there too retain the separate identity. This is an amazing thing that Yerushalmi is saying. I don't know if it's going to become clarified later on, but here we're saying actually comparing a case in which you take the lowest common denominator, but both are chayiv and biur, and saying here you take the lowest common denominator, and it could even exempt both of them from biur, which is a remarkable thing. I don't think we would ever, on our own, say such a tremendous chiddush, but say at least we chayiv and biur from the time of the less severe thing. No, here we don't say that.
So no concept of b'mino and min shein b'mino?
No concepts. No concept. Yeah.
Or no same time.
It's not a bittul. It's not a bittul. Yeah.
More of a davar chashuv, is cucumbers more important than
Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference. Okay? Averet va'koifer. Yeah, going back to the Mishnah, Halacha Beis. Vered, roses. Yeah,
how long?
15 minutes.
Commandments are going to.
Yes. Haver v'akofer. If you have a rose or a now, these are all different types of spices. Do you have the place? Haveret v'akofer is a different rose or another type of spice. V'aktaf, balsam. V'alotam, that's some other type of spice. So Yerushalmi Shevi'is with Meim Shevi'is. They have Shevi'is and their fruit. If you exchange some of them and also Shevi'is, it seems like they are considered to be fruits. Shomer ein l'ktav Shevi'is. Balsam doesn't have Shevi'is. Neisheinu pri, it's a sap. It's not a fruit, so it has no Shevi'is. Okay. Says the Gemara, going back to the Gemara. Rabbi Padas, Rabbi Yassi and Rabbi Yassi also Shem Yochanan. Ask Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yehuda, that which Rabbi Shimon says is sap, has no din shvi, it seems to be like Rabbi Yeshua. The Tzniya Tzama we learned over there. Rabbi Yeshua said, Shamati Shamamid B'Srafalin, if somebody makes cheese through rennet made from the sap of leaves or the sap of the roots of an orla tree, mutter. Because orla is only an isser in the fruit. Okay? B'srafa pagim osir. If you make the cheese with the srafa pagim, with the sap of the fruit, it's also, it's forbidden. Mipnei shu pri. Why? Because that, of course, is the main orla component. So we see here that he holds the same thing, that sap is not considered to be part of the fruit. Now that's very sap of the tree, right? The sarf ilan and sarf ikarin. Now that's very bad. The Gemara says, "Amalei Rabbi Zir, Rabbi Padas." Rabbi Zir said to Rabbi Padas, if that's the case, Kamad the Tamar Tamar Loch Rabbi Yeshua, we got a problem. There we paskin like Rabbi Yeshua, that the sap of an orla tree is not orla. So the logic would dictate that you have to follow through and say here too, Allah Rabbi Shimon, that the sap of the tree has no shvius, but we know that's not true because Chachamim are arguing on Rabbi Shimon on Yochik Rabim, Alochik Karabim. Rabbi Yehuda said, "V'dam yohi, don't worry. You think it's similar? Kal Rabbah, which is Yerushalmi talk for Ad Rabbah. On the contrary, there's no similarity. Ketaf Batel al Gabe Sorfo. By a balsam, the sap is the main part of the tree. There is nothing else in a balsam tree. Ich weiß nicht was heißt a balsam. I don't know. But in a balsam tree, there's nothing other than the sap. That is the tree. So therefore, it has Perush Shevi'is. By orla, there are a whole bunch of other things in the tree. For the primary component of the tree is not the sap. There are many other primary components. Furthermore, vod, another etchiluk. Ochli behem, but by Shevi'is, they're much looser definitions of what's considered to be a fruit. What's the proof of that? Ochle behema, an animal fodder, kedusha shvius chol as kedusha shvius. Vein kedusha chol even though it doesn't have, even though there's no arlon animal fodder. So therefore, the other parameters are much more strict. Do we have? Okay, one more minute. 6 o'clock. I have 1 minute to 6. Amar Rabbi Avun, Isla Chori, you have yet another answer. Shomer means Shmua. Rabbi Shua is saying a statement, Allah Moshe Misinai. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shem Garme, Rabbi Shimon is saying it on his own. Yes, Shmua is Allah Moshe Misinai. Or a tradition, I guess. I don't know. I take that back. He had a tradition from previous generations. Okay. You know what? Let's stop here then for today. We'll come back to this tomorrow. Okay. Amud Aleph. You're on Chaf Amud Aleph.
A little bit to go in the...
A little bit to go, okay. But, the Mishnah. But first in the Gemara. Before we'll go back to Mishnah in a second. But, let's find my place here. Yeah, Masaraf. An Chaf Amud Aleph. Oh, sorry. Chaf and Beis. Sorry. Masaraf. Just. Somebody else is here. Chaf Amud Aleph. That's him. Masaraf. somewhere here. Let me see. It's hard for me to see upside down. Yeah. You don't have words Masarf, that's why. That'll do it. In Tamar, you have here. Here, from here. Sarah, Amar Allah. Sarah, oh no, Shem, okay. Amar Allah, Saraf. Yeah. From there. Chafal from Ralph. Okay. Amar Allah. Saraf Peri or Pagin Peri is when it said, we said yesterday, now to make cheese, to curdle milk with the sap from orla fruit. So the question is the sap a fruit, or is the fruit itself the fruit, not the sap? What's the difference? In Tamer Saraf Pri, if you're going to say that the sap itself is considered part of the fruit, so then it also came with Truma Asur. Then if you use Truma to curdle your milk, so then the milk becomes Asur, receives the status of Truma. In Tamar Pugin Peri, if you're going to say, however, that the fruit itself, here, the unripe fruit, is the fruit, and the sap is just a byproduct, so then also can, if you use Truma fruit, the sap from an unripe Truma fruit, to curdle your milk, then mutter, the milk is mutter. Why is that? Because then I would say it's not the fruit itself. It's a byproduct of the fruit. It's hanoah from the truma, and therefore we say lama shanoyas truma muteres vanoyas arla asura. Hanoah from truma is permitted, even though hanoah from orla is prohibited. So therefore, if you use the sap of an unripe fruit and it was orla, that would render your cheese asur, because you had hanoah from a derivative product of orla. But if in fact sap is only a derivative product, and you use the sap of a truma fruit to curdle your milk, so then that's okay. You can actually use the cheese, because hanoah from a byproduct of the truma is perfectly okay.
Okay, so there's a distinction between the orla and the truma.
That's right. The distinction
even though they both are byproducts, or tolodas, or whatever.
Right. They're a byproduct. Orla is also banoah, whereas the other thing is not.
So it doesn't resolve the question of whether the sap is an actual fruit.
We don't resolve it, but that would be the ramification. If the sap is the fruit, then it's also, then it would make the cheese truma, right? Because then it's
it's the actual fruit.
It's the actual fruit, and we don't resolve this whole issue. Okay, now let's go back to the Mishnah. There's a little piece left in the Mishnah. Veret Chodosh, a new rose. Where is that? All the way at the bottom of your Tezan base. Now.
All right, yeah.
Veret Chodosh, you have that? Veret Chodosh, the second of the wide line. Okay, Veret Chodosh, Shekov Shabashem and Yoshan. You had a rose from the 7th year, and you put it in oil from the 6th year, in order to make the oil good fragrance to use as perfume. When the time for beer comes of the rose, Yilaki the sever, you have to take out the rose and do beer on it. But the oil, even though it received taste, or I should say, fragrance of the vered, of the rose, you don't have to do beer on the rose. And the Gemara is going to ask why not. Because it's not the rest of the Mishnah, in fact, does not follow that principle. From here on, in V'yoshan b'chodosh, it was vice versa. For instance, if it was a rose from the 6th year, which got mixed into oil of the 7th year, so chai beer, then not only do you have to do beer on the oil, you also have to do beer on the rose, because the rose absorbed the oil, the olive oil, which is 7th year olive oil. So therefore you have to do beer on
you have to do beer on non-edible.
Well, yeah, as long as it can be used for fragrance. Well, here, verit is edible, right?
Oh.
It is an edible product. It's a machal, sometimes machal adam, some machal behemo, but it is an edible product. Okay, but yashem v'chodesh chai b'biyur, and if it's an old rose in new oil, it's chai b'biyur. Similarly, charuvin chadoshon. If you pickled old carobs in new carobs of 7th year in old wine of the 6th year, or Yishan b'chodosh, old carobs of the 6th year and wine of the 7th year, chavim v'biur, then everything is chayiv and biur, because they both absorb from each other. Zak, Zak, this general principle: kosher nosim nositam, anything which imparts a taste, chayiv levire, you have to biur, min b'sheino mino. If it's even if it's one type and another type, since they absorb back and forth from each other, you have to biur. Umin b'mida b'koshu, and if you have one echveis, let's say carob, among 1,000 carobs, and that one carob is a carob which requires biur, so you have to be avar all of them. It's like davar shesh l'matir, it's not batel, because you have very easy resolution to the issue, which is to do biur on all of them. So therefore, in that case, you have to do biur on all of them. Can't leave any of them. Hashvius oseres ko. Oh, you don't have anything else in the Mishnah?
Okay, yeah.
Hashvius oseres kosher b'mina. Shvius asers anything which is in general the same idea. Shvius asers anything which is of its own type. But shelo b'mina, if it's not of its own type, in other words, if it's apples and oranges as opposed to apples and oranges, then it should be no sin time. It has to give a taste, a flavor, and then it asks the thing in which gives the flavor. Okay, let's go back to the Gemara. Hacha atamar yilaki tasveret. You see hacha?
Yeah.
Hacha atamar yilaki tasveret. Here you say you collect in the ratio. You said you collect the rose, and that you do beer on the rose and not on the oil. Why not? At the end of the subsequent in the Mishnah, every substance which is pickled in another substance, we say both substances absorb back and forth. So why in the ratio do you not say that? Says more Rabbi Avo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan said, train Tanoim. There are two separate Tanoim in our Mishnah. The Tano made the first statement in our Mishnah that if you have a rose of the 7th year in oil of the 6th year, that you don't have to do beer on the oil, only on the rose. That's not consistent with the rest of the Mishnah. That's a separate Tana, in fact. Not the Tana of the rest of the Mishnah. Rabbi Zira said, Yochel ana potel b'trei patre. I can say that I can resolve this issue by saying that the Mishnah is talking on two planes. First, it talks about a new rose and old oil, meaning the rose is a 7th year rose, and it's pickled in 6th year oil. In that case, we'll have to do beers on the rose. But here's where the difference is. The Yashim b'chodesh, what does it mean? A new old one and a new one? That's a vered shel Shevi'is, a vered of the 7th year. Shekov shel b'shemen shel shminis, where you kovish in this oil the 8th year. Now, in that case, we say, very interesting thing. Let's tell you about a Shemitah rose in which you never did beer. You didn't do beer on it. So since you didn't do beer on it, so therefore, at the time you pickled it in the oil, it already was Isser. It was Osir. So then it becomes also like any other Issentor, like Chazer, right? You still have an Eitzah to beer on it, but until you do that, it should be an Isser, and it Asers the oil. So it is saying here, this Tana holds that where you put a mixture together of something chayv in beer and something not chayv in beer prior to beer, so you just remove the thing which you have to beer on and you revire it. Where afterwards, where you put the something which is chayv in beer in with a mixture with something else after the chayv in beer, so now it's much more of a bona fide isser, and therefore in that case not only do you do beer on the substance which shouldn't not beer on, but even beer on the other permissible substance. Okay, that's how he learns our Mishnah. Okay, let's start the new parak. Klau go to Lom b'Shvi'is. They said a major principle by Shemitah. Kam yuchad l'machal adam. anything which is specifically designated to be for human consumption, you can't make from it a bandage for a person, some sort of salve for a wound. You certainly can't make for it a salve for an animal. Anything which is not specifically designated for human consumption, you're allowed to make from it a bandage for a person, but not for an animal. Anything which is not designated neither for a person's teeth nor for an animal's consumption. What if you then designate it for human consumption or for animal consumption? Then it receives the halacha shmita, and nosim alav chumrei adam. You give it the stringencies which are applied to that which is eaten by a human being, and stringencies of that which we eat by an animal. Now, chishul of keitzim, what if you harvested something and you designate it to be wood? It never doesn't receive the status of kedusha Shevi'is. It remains like wood. Kigon, what falls in this category? Hasio, and that's a spice called savory. Va'ezov, it's a spice called hyssop. Va'koran is a spice called thyme. All these spices can also be wood. So therefore, it depends what your intent was when you harvested it. Okay, Gemara. Raibun Barchia boy kumi Rabbi Zira. Raibun Barchia says, asking for Rabbi Zira. It says in the Parsha Shemitah both the issue of that which is fit for human consumption and that which is fit for animal consumption, both being susceptible to Shemitah. My chomis meimar, what did you see to say that ochli adam enosei me'em melugma, that those things which are for human consumption, you do not make from them bandages, whereas those things which are fit for animal consumption, osi me'em melugma, you do make from them bandages. What's the difference? Amar lei, so he said this is the difference. V'yisa shabbos ha'oretz lachem li'ochla. That which grows in the Sabbath of the land should be for you to eat, meaning stuff which you normally eat, human beings, so that must be saved for the purpose of eating. It cannot be used for the purpose of anything else, including not for bandages. Okay? Mi'et, this is an exclusion. Ma mi'et, you probably just have the word mi'et, right?
No.
Oh, you have the whole statement? Mi'et, ma mi'et, ochli adam she'eno simem meluvas, teaches us